Welcome to Coffee with Kofi. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, Kofi. Thank you for having me. I'm really
Yes,
pleased to be here.
it's my absolute pleasure, and I know that we've caught up. But for anyone listening, would you just share with us where you are in the world at the moment? What's going on with you? Because
I'm
um,
I'm in the beautiful coastal town of Belmar, New Jersey, in the United States. It's about an hour south of New York City, on the Jersey Shore.
okay,
I
amazing.
live in the UK most of the time, but my family and I we have a home here because we moved to the UK in 2012 from here, and this is just where we when we're back in the States, and we always are during the summer. This is just where we go.
Fantastic. So it's an opportunity to come back. I imagine reconnect with people and
Yeah.
yeah,
My family enjoy the beach, I've
yeah,
got friends here, so does my
yeah.
wife and our kids.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Good that you could do it. And thank you, because I know we caught up earlier. You were saying that you're there for a little bit and then you're flying the other way to get to Hong Kong, spend some time down there as well.
Yeah, yeah, on Wednesday, 2 weeks in Hong Kong, visiting, my wife's, she's got some family there and some friends, and we've been to Hong Kong many, many times over 30 years. I love it.
Yeah.
So very much looking forward to it. Not looking forward to the, concomitant jet lag, but,
No,
that's part of my life anymore.
I was in territory, unfortunately. But no, again, I said it before, I say it again. Thank you for making time for us to do this in between the travels and connecting with families. So what I'd love to do is a brief introduction, which you will know nothing about, but I would like you to just hear me out and let me know if I'm on the money, off the money, and it's fine. It's totally fine. Is that all right?
Yeah?
All right, awesome. So I want to first and foremost say welcome back to everyone to Coffee with Kofi, the podcast where I sit down with people who built purpose-driven careers, unpack the choices, the setbacks, and the moments of clarity that got them there. My guest today started later than most in his industry. He didn't land his first professional art job until he was 27, after studying philosophy, not illustration, as you might think. That late start has turned into a career spanning more than 25 years, primarily with DC Comics, where he's contributed artwork to nearly every major character in the DC universe, from, if you know your comics, Green Lantern, The Flash, Batman, and so many more. And in addition, he is an author, a graphic novelist, and a teacher. We've heard a father and a husband. The list does go on, but we'll come on to some of this later. But beyond the career, my guest has also turned the personal loss and grief of losing his brother into service. He's become a volunteer supporting others facing mental health challenges, and we'll talk about this in more detail. The pivot into comics, the values that have carried him through nearly 3 decades in a demanding industry, and what it means to find purpose on the other side of playing. Um, Welcome, Prentis Rollins. Thank you for saying that. Well,
That sums it up pretty perfectly. Thank you.
yeah. So no one's getting fired in terms of the research team. That's okay. Great, great. All right. So I'd love to just jump into it because there's so much to talk about. And I know we were connected and we met, and it was just such a flowing, easy conversation. We would probably still be there if weren't other things to be doing. But I'd love to get into your backstory, keeping with the comic theme, and ask whether in 60 seconds or less, whether you could share your origin story just to give us, in your words, who it is that we're listening to today or watching today.
When I was 11 years old, Star Wars came out, and that's when I started drawing comics. And I just wanted to tell Star Wars stories. This is Star Wars before it had any sequels. It was just a movie called Star Wars. Um, and I kept it up all through adolescence. As you said, at uni, I discovered philosophy and fell in love with it. And for a time, I was contemplating a career as an academic, as a philosophy teacher.
Mm,
Got into a PhD program at Rutgers University, left after 2.5 years because I was just kind of exhausted with school. It's the old story. I didn't have a dissertation topic. I completed all my coursework, but I just wasn't going anywhere. And so I decided to make a go at becoming a professional comics artist, which was, kind of my only marketable skill. And so I took a lot of art classes in New York City where I was living with my wife, and just to get my figure drawing up to snuff. And then I started getting work, as you said, around 1993. And I never looked back. I worked for the better part of 20 years, full time, more or less, for DC Comics. And in more recent years, it's been my own art books and graphic novels.
Mm.
Yeah. Was that
Wow.
about 50 seconds, I hope?
No, that was good. That was good. And I know that you've gone into it beautifully insofar as just that art from what you thought you wanted to do, taking it further with academia and looking at the PhD and then discovering that wasn't it, and then doing some retraining and coming out the other end. I'd like to go back a little further because you did it perfectly in the time. So bonus points to you. But just to understand where you sort of grew up and I suppose for me, just how family were with the transition, because sometimes that can come into conversations I have where they're either for it,
I
with
I
it, or not with it.
I grew up in Northern Virginia in the suburbs of Washington, DC in the 1970s and 80s. And it was very much sort of what you might picture for movies like The Breakfast Club or I don't know, or Stand By Me. I mean, it was just very much a quasi idyllic, um, things weren't stable at home. I had four stepfathers, and so it was kind of chaotic in that department. But my mother, always she supported me very, very much in terms of my development as a young artist. And when in uni, I announced that I was, transitioning to studying philosophy. She was a little nonplussed at first, but eventually she came to support it also. And so much so that when I announced I was dropping out of grad school, she was really distressed. But she again came around, and so I always had, I had support from her, psychologically and emotionally, and from my wife, of course. And um, so yeah, is that kind of what you were?
Yeah, no, it's helpful. I didn't know that backstory. I didn't know what you were going to come up with. So I dancing with you in the moment, but it's interesting because I know you said that your mum sort of came around to it, but you had that emotional and psychological support, which is just the beautiful thing, and a blessing to have, you know.
And also, given the kind of chaotic scene at home, um, part of the reason that I mean, I started drawing when I was about, 5 or 6 years old. All kids do. It's a weird
Mm.
psychological fact that all humans draw if they have the means available. Most stop at about age 12.
Okay.
Some keep doing it. I was one of those, and drawing for me was kind of I developed a really, really detailed and rich inner world, to kind of, retreat to and shield me from whatever chaos was going on in the home or around me.
Mm.
So it became kind of a survival, strategy/mechanism. I think it's often this way, with creative types. So yeah, it was kind of a factored. I think I don't put much stock in the concept of talent. I don't think I really drew any better than anybody else at my age. I just it's just sort of like playing tennis. You keep at it, and it all gets programmed into your wrist and elbow, and eventually, you get better and better. And that's sort of what happened with me. Um, I loved it. I just did it all the time, again, partly to as a sanity saving device. And also I just immediately, when I was very young, I discovered science fiction and horror, and my mother was a huge fan of those things. I remember when I was a little kid, we would get the Sunday Washington Post, which was a huge newspaper back then. And the first thing I would do would be to pull out the TV guide, which was a listing of all the programs and movies running on TV back then, and I would underline all the sci-fi and horror ones that were playing on the local channels, and then do my utmost to watch them all. And this is all it was all just, it's partly fun, but again, it was partly a survival, strategy, you know?
I can imagine how the outside world, the reality isn't necessarily all calm, and how one might want to, with the volatility of stepfathers coming and going, etc. But having that place to retreat to or to escape to and create imagination
It
from.
was literally escapism in my case.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can imagine. And thank you so much for sharing the book. But I reckon that many would say that you're being modest with this there's no talent situation.
I look at I still have the thing is, I still have a lot of my artwork from back then. I drew the first comics I drew in 1977, I drew them in hardbound black, sketchbooks, which you can still see today in art stores. Um, and so I still have them, and I look at them, and I look, uh, at and I can see that, it's not any better than any other 11-year-old's drawing.
Mm.
They all start kind of at the same baseline. Um, uh, I mean, if there is, a question of talent, I think the talent part boils more down to an ability to absorb things from around me. I was always, as I said, watching movies and reading other comic books, and so yeah, I would adopt things. And some people are good at that, and some aren't. Maybe I'm better at that. But
Mm.
yeah, I so
Okay.
when I say I don't think I had really a whole lot of talent,
Yeah.
that's what I mean. It's not humility. I'm just saying I started. I didn't come out of the gate drawing brilliantly. It was just a matter of practice and sticking to it.
That resonates from there's so many schools of thought, but the 10,000 hours concept where
Right.
just perseverance, grit, and just not giving up at something, we can become competent and maybe even brilliant at it. So that I won't take that away from you because, as I say, you did spend a lot of time doing it, and naturally it helps if you love it, because otherwise I don't know whether you would have continued. But no, thank you. That really helps. And let me take us on to our next question, which is about your studies actually. So I've noted that you studied philosophy at University of Southern California and then Rutgers
Yeah.
before when professional comic book artist at about 27. Like, what was the moment that you knew that comics was the path? Because I suppose you could have done something else, not necessarily picked up the pen again or the pencils, but yeah, what was the moment when you knew that that was where you really wanted to go?
Late in grad school, I did start drawing comics again while I was still taking courses. Um, I sort of rediscovered my love for it. And so, yeah, I did have a little crisis where I knew that I was kind of done with my studies in grad school. And I briefly toyed with the idea of switching over to law or something like that. But I knew in my heart that no, that wasn't going to cut it. And so it sort of all at once became a kind of do or die situation. I figured I was gonna, you know, um, become a comics artist or die trying. And so I I w during those 2 years that I was taking art classes at the Art Students League in New York, I was working half-time as an office temp, um, just to bring in some money. That is, I would sign up with an agency, and then they would send you to various companies to file or type. Um, and yeah, and at a certain point, I started, sending out samples to publishers and going to conventions and showing my work. Um, but yeah, it didn't happen immediately. It did, I was, as you said, a relative latecomer. Most comics artists in the US, at least, they begin very, very young because they don't have this detour, into something else like philosophy. Some begin teenagers. So, but eventually, yeah, I did. I kept at it. I just kept sending out samples and going to conventions, and eventually, I started getting work.
Mm, no, that perseverance comes back again. So it's persevering to do the thing, but then persevering to get the work that comes off the back of the thing as well. So thank you. And um, you said like do or die. So that was interesting for me because sometimes people have shared that when you set your heart on something, you could be seen as being determined or delusional, one of the two things. And And in some respects, you have to sometimes close every other option other than making it, because otherwise I think you can get dissuaded from what you're doing. Did
Yeah.
that resonate with you in terms of you had to be absolutely nailed on that I'm going to do this come what may? Because
Yeah, I mean, you can be delusional. I mean, there are plenty of people out there who would love to become writers, creatives, singers, artists, but they're incapable of looking objectively at their own work, and they don't really listen when people try to tell them how to do it better, because they've just got this idea that they've nailed it, and they haven't. So that is a phenomenon of people who, you know, won't listen to criticism and are sort of quasi delusional and think they're going to, do this thing. Um, I when I went to conventions to get my stuff critiqued by other artists and editors, I always took their advice very, very seriously and incorporated it, um, as best I could. The other thing I was doing is, yeah, I was, kind of manifesting, back before that was even a word.
Mm.
I remember, again, I started sending out, like short stories and art samples to various small indie publishers and to DC and Marvel. And, I would back in those days, this has been the '90s, you would have gotten a form rejection letter or occasionally, a handwritten letter. And when I got those, I was happy because I knew that every comics artist had to have a stack of rejection letters before. And so every time I got one, I added it to the stack and I thought, "Oh my goodness, I'm that much closer to having my complete stack." And so I it was there was never any real doubt in my mind that I was gonna work in this business, but I simply knew that realistically speaking, you had to do this and this and this and get one of those thises was getting your stack of rejection letters. So,
Wow.
it comes down in part to attitude because a lot of people, with which each successive rejection letter, they would be that much more dissuaded. Um but it actually I remember at the time, it fueled me. So
What is, do you know, Prentice? I think you've just cracked life on some levels, because I think whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you've got an idea as a creative that you want to put out there, or some combination of both, that what I hear there is that you reframed rejection to something different, which was the pathway to success. So I'm about to blow. I'm about to get that. I know I just need to have a certain amount of these, and then it's going to switch for me. And I've never thought of it in that way, but I've heard people say this swim through the nose to get to the yes. And I suppose that sort of, it's giving me that similar vibe. Does that
Ye
correlate?
that's a good way of putting it, swim through the nose to get to the yes. Just don't let them stop you, let them encourage you, but by the same token, um, when you get criticism or, take it seriously and work with it. Don't take it this is another thing as a creative that some people are not able to do. They're not able to separate their themselves from their work. Um,
Right.
and so if their work gets criticized, they take it personally. They're being criticized. And that's one of the biggest hindrances I've encountered, for people progressing as creatives, in terms of their own personal development, but also in terms of getting work and a career.
Yeah.
You've got to be in a headspace where, somebody can criticize your work and you take it positively because they're helping you. You don't
Mm.
negatively, like they're attacking you.
Yeah. Yeah, that is another mic drop moment for me, because getting what you shared there is broader. I think it goes across the human condition when we talk about interacting with one another.
Yeah.
from, corporate perspective or creative perspective, any which way you interact, if that ego that you have is so strong that you cannot accept that actually there's stuff for you to learn and grow and develop, and you take these things personally, then there is an element of delusion there, because I think we all, I've come to realize now, I will never be quote unquote done like with developing. I think it's a lifelong pursuit of evolution.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Yeah, 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 totally. Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
smashing. Smashing. Wow. Okay. I need to keep moving and not meditate on the things that you were saying, but I'm loving it so far. So thank you. Thank you so much. And actually, I wanted to talk a bit about your time in philosophy. And I picked up somewhere that you had said that amazing gentleman, Dallas Willard,
Yeah.
it's your philosophy mentor, one of the sort of lecturers I'm aware of, was one of the most profoundly decent people that you've known.
Yeah.
When someone speaks so highly of someone, I'm curious as to what it was that you admired about him. Rest his soul. I know he's passed now, but yeah, I'd love to know.
Dallas, at American universities in the philosophy departments, they're back then at least, and probably still now, they're very, very heavily skewed in the direction of Anglo-American analytic philosophy with its concentration on language and logic.
Mhm.
Dallas, and then there's typically 1 or 2 token professors who specialize in 20th century European philosophy and the history of philosophy. That was Dallas. His areas were phenomenology, existentialism, hermeneutics, and critical theory. Um, and when I took about 3, maybe 4 classes with him, and we became like friends. I mean, at first it was Professor Willard, and by the end of it, he was Dallas to me. Um, and when I say he was one of the most profoundly decent men I've ever encountered, I just mean that he was aside from being a philosophy professor, he was also, I believe, a Lutheran minister. Um, and he was just one of those extraordinarily rare people that just exude an aura of goodness.
Mm,
I'm not really sure how else to put it. He was um, a great wit, and a great friend and a friendly person, but it was something else. I mean, it was one if he was one of those people where if you spend any time in his presence, it begins to affect you. You begin to become almost better yourself. Not them in league with Jesus and the Buddha, but I can only imagine that Jesus and the Buddha had the same sort of aura going on.
mm,
Um, it's and I don't know if I've ever really encountered anybody else like that since. I just know that he made me feel safe, and he stoked my love of philosophy, and he was a great teacher, and, yeah, he's one of those people that will forever live in my heart.
mm. No, no, and that's so touching, and it's giving me the feels now just imagining how impactful those moments were. He's in the presence of someone, you can really feel that warmth and that betterment of yourself in there. And
Yeah.
people, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think people never really leave us when they pass on, and because I think the memories, like you've just said now, like it's Dallas he's still kicking around. Like I feel his presence through the
Yeah,
words you used to describe your relationship with him. Does that make sense to you?
I mean, one of the things I sort of took away from my time with him and studying philosophy, was the idea, which has gained traction in science, that, but it was an idea prior to that in philosophy and religion, the idea that time, as we experience it, isn't objectively real. I mean, our minds are designed and to perceive reality, sequentially, piecemeal, one thing at a time, and but there's no compelling reason to think that if all the conscious minds were zapped out of existence, there's no reason to think time would continue ticking on like that because time consists in being measured. If there's no mind measuring it, it's not there. And so, from a certain point of view, what you said about these people never leaving us, I think that's literally true from a certain point of view.
Mm,
Um, from a certain point of view, everything is happening all at once. In the mind of God, if there is such a thing, it's everything is
mm,
happening right now. You know,
yeah.
um, right now, Dallas is teaching philosophy, and right now, Jesus is hanging on the cross, and Shakespeare is writing his sonnets, and right now it's the year 2087, and 3050. So, but we don't perceive things that way because our minds are structured in this peculiar way. So,
Mm,
I and this is a thought again, it's been around in philosophy for ages, and it's as I said, it's gaining traction in science, but it's a very comforting thought, it's a very nice idea, and I'm very attached to it.
no,
So
100%. You make me recall this movie that I saw some time ago. I don't know if you saw it, but I think something along the lines of everything, everywhere, or
once
just
I
yeah,
did I don't remember that much, I remember enjoying it,
yeah.
but it kind of played with time and
Yeah, play with time and things were happening all at once, which it was mind blowing in the way that it happened. But yeah, we'll need to pick up on that the philosophical aspect on that for sure. One thing I did want to ask is influence and how much your time in philosophy has shaped you as a visual artist.
it didn't really shape me as a visual artist, but it very much influenced my subsequent writing. I've written, a number of graphic novels, and they are very much informed by the stuff that I read while I was studying philosophy.
Okay.
So that it very much shaped the way my sort of reservoir of concepts to draw on, and just the way I approach the writing. Uh,
Mm,
yeah, so it very much, I'm very, I thank God that I had that time studying philosophy in that regard, because it totally changed me in terms of, and like so one of the practical side effects is, um yeah, I mean, during my time working for DC, I was, working on their superhero stuff. Um, and I funnily enough, I didn't actually read comics that much as a kid. I had a shoebox full of them like everybody did,
yeah.
uh, but I never really, I never really developed, a huge passion. Again, I started drawing comics when Star Wars came out, and it was science fiction films that shaped my aesthetic when I was a teenager. Star Wars, Alien, Soylent Green, Logan's Run, things like that.
Mm,
And so even back then, when I was a teenager, when I was writing and drawing my own comic stories, they were all science fiction stories that had just created out of whole cloth that had nothing to do with superheroes. Um, and then I worked all those years for DC Comics on their superhero stuff. And I loved it. I mean, it was a blast. I mean, you're getting paid to sit at home and draw superheroes, I mean, um, but I always when, back then when people would ask me what I love reading, I always kind of said that in terms of the superhero stuff, I deal, but I don't use. Okay. When I even back then, when I did read comics, I read a lot of, it was mostly kind of, literary graphic novels and kinda high-end stuff like Mouse, which is a very famous, graphic novel about the Holocaust. Um, and so and now at this phase of my career, I'm back to, writing and drawing science fiction graphic novels. Uh,
mm.
yeah. So it's funny. I mean, there's this interesting sense in which all that time with DC was itself kind of a detour.
Mhm.
I loved it, but what I love even more and what I love most is doing my own stuff, my own science fiction material.
Yeah. There's something that it's this thread that's coming through some of these conversations that I have where I appreciate it. Philosophy didn't inform your visual art, but you use this phrase that it gave you a reservoir of content to draw from later on, and how science fiction was really your thing, but the comics and joy of superheroes, although it wasn't, it's something that you kind of got into. There's something that I'm really sensing and picking up on, and I really want you to hold me to account if I'm wide of the mark. That when we go on these journeys in life, you start off and then you enter the world of work, and I'm gonna do this, that, or the other. Nothing is ever really wasted because it will either inform and draw you to what you love or to what you have an aversion to. And along the way, that picture supports the evolution of who you then become for a moment in the time that we talk about this all happening all at once. But for that moment, all these things that you've experienced, is the different roles that you've had, the paths that you may have gone down, maybe being a professor, but then actually not, but then now working for DC, but actually your passion is in sci-fi. Nothing is wasted in that journey. It all kind of adds together. So hold me to account, because I'm feeling like that's a thread, but as I say that, I play back to you. Where does that sit in terms of level of agreement or disagreement? And please be open with me.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Especially, I mean, if you're a creative, um, every every little experience you have along the way, everything you do, everything you read, every, personal encounter, all that stuff goes into your reservoir. I mean, and if nothing else, it goes into your unconscious and lies dormant until it bubbles up in something you're creating. I've written things, um, and then and I've thought, oh, this is really kind of great. This is really original. And then I'll go back and reread a novel that I haven't read for 20 years, and I'll see it, and I'll realize, oh, I picked this up. It went into my unconscious, and then it bubbled up. And that's I personally I don't think I've ever really had an original idea in my life. I don't know if anybody really ever does anymore.
Mm.
It's and when you're constructing something creatively, a song, a bit of writing, a graphic novel, it's not, I mean, this is an old cliche. It's not the story, it's the telling. It's how you're able to combine elements in interesting new ways and patterns. If you are a creative, the one thing that is unique and that is your once in all of reality contribution is your emotional spin on things. The feeling that you have towards the elements and the feelings that come across as you express them, that's unique. But the story elements themselves, I think that's more a matter of taking things that you've experienced and read and done and combining them in interesting new ways. And so yes, getting back to what you were saying, nothing is wasted. It all is, matter to be worked up in your
Mm.
creative endeavors. Whether you're bricklaying or working at McDonald's, those experiences themselves increase your insight and the wealth of your experience and make you a better creative.
Yeah. No, I'm obviously glad. We could have had a healthy debate if you disagreed, but I'm glad that you see it similarly, because I think I read somewhere the other day that creativity is partly the ability to see the interconnectivity between vastly disparate things,
Yeah.
and sort of synthesize that. But what I didn't have from that, what I read, was what you just said: the uniqueness that artists, creators, humans bring to something is their feeling and the emotional connection to the material and how they portray that. I didn't
Their
have that.
take on the
Yeah.
meaning that they derive from it, the meaning that they think is relevant and universal,
Yeah.
um, and how they express that.
Mm.
sense.
Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you so much. Again, I'm going to hold this thought, and I will definitely want to come back to this. But I wanted to take us forward a little bit to Milestone Media under Dennis Cowan, where I understand you cut with teeth before the DC period. From the earlier years, if you look back, what did you learn then that perhaps still informs some of what you do now?
Milestone Media was a company, a comics publisher that was partnered with DC Comics. Their headquarters was in Manhattan on 23rd Street, whereas DC was on 51st Street at
Oh,
that time. But they were partnered, and so when a Milestone comic came out, it had both the Milestone bullet and the DC bullet on the front cover, because
oh,
Milestone published by DC. And Milestone was founded by Dennis Cowan, Dwayne McDuffie, Derek Dingle, and Michael Davis, for Black creatives in the comics industry, and they wanted a line of comics, superhero comics that were all um, uh, racial minorities, Hispanics, Blacks, Asians. Um, and so, yes, I that was actually the first big company that I got work from in 1993. And over the course of 4 years, they Milestone ceased publication in 1997, although it has had a recent resurgence. They're back. Over those 4 years, I did a tremendous amount of work for Milestone, and Dennis Cowan was pretty much my de facto mentor. Brilliant artist and a fine man, and I inked an awful lot of his penciling, meaning he would that's the way it worked in the American, it still does to a certain extent. You would have a person who would do the first pass of the artwork with pencil, and then that would get passed on, and it would be on, high quality Bristol board, this archival paper, and then that would be passed on to an inker. That was me. I would basically create the camera ready line art using proper inking tools, get pens, brushes, India ink, and drafting tools. And so I inked hundreds of pages of Dennis's pencils, and it very much influenced the way I draw. Um, Yeah. So and that was an extremely valuable time to me, and I'm really, delighted that it happened that way, because I improved a tremendous amount under Dennis's guidance. Um, and that's basically all it came down to, was just me doing every now and then, he would pull me into his office. This was like every 3 or 4 months, and sit me down and say, "This sucks. You're doing this wrong." Yeah. And it would take about 1 minute. And that was the mentoring right there.
okay.
Um,
Tough love. It
so
sounds like it was tough love. Yeah.
but it was mainly just the experience of working with him.
Mm.
And at
I
that
like.
it was an extraordinarily happy time, because at that time, my wife, Jacqueline Shing, was also working for Milestone. She got a job as an editor there. And so she would bring the pages home to me to work on, and I would, and we were both totally in on what was going on in the company, and we became, it was for a spell there, for about 2 or 3 years, it was kind of like a family. I mean, the Milestone people, the editors and the artists, they would hang out after hours. We would go to movies together. We would have meals together. Um
Mm.
and it was just a wonderful time, because it was the Clinton era, 90s in New York City, pre 9/11. Nobody, there's this really strange sense in which the world has just gone to hell in a handbasket, and it all sort of started with 9/11. I'm overstating things, obviously,
Sure.
but during that period, the Clinton years in New York City, the economy was booming. Everybody, just looking back, it seemed like nobody had a care in the world. Very
Mm.
common. Pre-internet, you weren't walking around feeling personally and perpetually overwhelmed all the time by your own iPhone. I mean, uh, people, they were free in that regard.
Mm.
They just had time to to be in together and to attend to one another. which the world has changed. Sorry, don't get me started.
No, 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 no. I love this, and I said that to you when we were talking about getting this started. That there will be, without a doubt, some side quests which I would love for us to go down, and this is a worthy one because it's a cause close to my heart. This notion of disconnecting and
Mm.
coming back to ourselves. The milestone media thing has me thinking. In my work, coaching people and working with leaders, etc. How much of what you experienced there was leadership related versus external? Because I guess I've picked up a lot around the Clinton era and how we were in essence at that time. Because I remember there was fewer cares in the world. It was a different time versus what Dennis and the team were creating internally that made you want to hang out with these people, and what made you feel like you were part of something. Like how much was driven from leadership, or how much was it circumstantial, environmental factors? Does that make sense?
I think so. I think so. Virtually none of it had anything to do with leadership. It was more just camaraderie amongst writers and artists and editors.
Mm.
We were all creatively on the same page. We all knew what the mission of Milestone Media was and approved of it and loved it. Um, and it was just a bunch of really cool people, which was exceptional because the funny thing about the comics industry is before I was working in it, I had this picture in my head of the guys at DC Comics and Marvel Comics as being just a bunch of really happy, nice guys, happy to be happy to be, making comics, excited to be doing this thing they loved as kids, um, and just loving it and loving life and just full of love, love, love.
Mhm, mhm.
The reality is when I got there, fiefdoms, um, people trying to defend their fiefdoms and, yeah, I remember at DC, you just had a lot of really unhappy people. I'm talking about the editorial staff. This is, again, a long time ago. I don't know how things are now. Unhappy in the sense that they were jockeying for promotion and not getting it. They were being fired without warning because they had offended somebody or encroached on somebody's fiefdom. I would make relationships with editors um, and I would be getting a lot of work for them, and then I would walk into the offices and find out, oh, they were fired. They're gone. And that's it. Just gone. And there's a lot of that. That it was not like that at Milestone. At Milestone, it synced up to the picture I had. You had happy people, happy to be in each other's presence. It would and so it was this, and it was just this environment that sparked and promoted creativity, um, and 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 that's part of the reason that we were all kind of friends and wanted to be in each other's presence even outside of work hours.
No, that makes sense. I would love to at some point. Maybe we can pick this up personally or separately on one of these, just to sort of unpack that a bit more because you've got two collections of people, right? DC is one thing, Milestone is one thing, but the experience, lived experience you had, one versus the other, completely different. And so I would really love to unpack and see whether there is anything that I could glean to learn from around how you get more of one milestone versus the other, because the way you describe milestone, special. So let's do that, and let me keep us gliding through because there's still a bit to cover, and it's just been brilliant just getting into like the history of things and the insights that you were sharing. So thank you. Now, one of the things that we haven't talked about, but you did mention kind of, was Dennis's pencilmanship and the new inking. And how is it that you came to get involved with the album artwork for Jizza from the Wu-Tang Clan? Because you may not know this, but the Wu-Tang Clan, as hip hop goes, as a collective, one of my favorite of all times. Ghostface Killer, the Jizza, the Wizard, those guys, they Method, Redman, they operate on a different plane with the. So anyway, how did that happen? Because I'm just like, wow.
I was visiting my parents in Yuma, Arizona, and I got a phone call from Dennis Cowan, and he said, "Hey man, I've got this album cover I'm penciling. Do you want to ink it?" And I said, "Sure." I said, who's the recording artist?" And he said, Wu-Tang Clan. And I this was 1990. I don't know when did Wu-Tang Clan begin? Around then? I mean,
Yeah, I remember them from the 90s. I mean, they may have been out a bit before, but I remember them from the 90s, and they've gone on to have some of them individual careers along the way. But yeah, from
well,
that,
I said sure. So he FedExed me the penciled, his penciled version. I inked it. Uh, I, I won't mention how much I got paid, but it wasn't much. And then a fellow named Jason Scott Jones, another dear friend from Milestone, he was a colorist at that time. He did the color, and I think he did it with Photoshop. And this was back when Photoshop was brand new. And I mean, he was one of the artists doing digital color, one of the first ones to be doing that. So yeah, as far as I was concerned at the time, I was just, inking this album cover and for a band I'd never heard of. And then it came out, and from what I understand, it's like multi-platinum, or I mean,
yeah,
it's kind of turned out to be one of the iconic 90s album covers.
yeah, yeah. I remember looking at it thinking, wow, this is like, because they had a real thing for, I don't know, like going back to their stories, there was some stuff that would happen that they rap about and talk about that would lead me to think that they want to escape. And so there's like a lot of references to sort of Shaolin um, um, monks and the sort of chess, but also the just out of their hood experiences that you wouldn't expect them to talk about as eloquently as they did rap about, you know? So when I remember seeing it thinking, that this is pretty groundbreaking. Little did I know that years down the line, I'd be talking to the man that had something to do with it.
Little did I know that it would turn out to be something. At the time I thought it was nothing.
Gosh,
One of
that's what.
That's just one of those funny happenstances of, as your career as a creative, you just happen to end up involved with this thing.
Wow. Well, legendary stuff. I might see, I don't, so CDs aren't in vogue anymore. If I can find mine, I'll bring it to you next time and see if you can initial it for me, ascribe it for me. We can make some money, apprentice. Me and you can make some money. Can make some money. um, so last question about sort of career and things, and then I want to move on to some deeper things on a personal level. But if we look back, I ask you to look back at nearly like what 30 years in a really demanding industry. What's perhaps one of the most important things that you've learned, that you've taken away from it?
Um, sheesh. I guess it would probably, just off the top of my head, it would come back to the whole concept of manifesting, which God help me, I really don't like using pop psychobabble. But yeah, just in terms of getting into a career that you want to, especially if it's a competitive field like one of the creative fields, and in terms of carrying out your own personal projects, um, approach it. It's all a matter of attitude. You've gotta come at these things with the kind of Yoda mindset, do or do not, there is no try. Um,
Mm.
Yeah, and that I suppose would be, for what it's worth, that would be my advice towards to people that are, trying to break into a creative field. You know, uh, be objective about your own work to the best extent you're able. Take criticism, don't take it personally, and use it when you get it. Treat it like gold, and and see, uh, have faith that, every little setback is bringing you that much closer towards your first success. That was how it worked out in my experience, and that's very often how it works out for most people, I think.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. I appreciate the being objective, Yoda-like mentality of do or do not. There is no try. Um, I love how you quickly switch from seeing to having faith, because I think that they are diametrically opposed. Sometimes we can't see the growth, we can't see the progress, but having faith allows you to carry on believing that it's coming, right? Like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So that tickled me and really, really resonated, particularly as I was in church on Sunday and they were telling in the homily about Peter walking out to meet Jesus in the sea, and then he suddenly saw the wind
Yeah.
picking up waves and then started to sink in this panic of faith, which the priest then, detour, this is my term, the priest then said is much like our journeys in faith, insofar as sometimes we have it and then other times we doubt it and then we may start to sink
Right.
because we lose it. But I think from your mindset, attitude perspective, like seeing the no's as one step closer to the yes, and that is part of that journey of really becoming, I think you can overcome that despondency that can hit you if you just see rejection after rejection and take it literally. So that's juicy stuff. Thank you so much. And yeah, thank you. So I wanted to signpost that at this point I would love to just touch upon something that I guess connected us, when we met and we started talking about giving back and sort of mental health and things like that, and touch on your brother, and appreciate that you lost him to suicide
Yeah.
some years ago.
It was, Valentine's Day of 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't forget the date. And I really want to just unpick with you a bit around how that loss led you to volunteering and supporting others, with mental health challenges, because you don't need to, you don't have to. Some people do enough of other things, but please tell me a bit more about it.
It was a shock at the time, but in retrospect, the wonder was that it took him this long to do it as it did, because he'd been suffering from depression, acute anxiety, alcoholism. He was abusing Xanax, and complex PTSD. Um, and at that time, I had been wanting to get involved with volunteering in some sort of frontline, visceral way, and his death galvanized me in this direction. I Googled Suicide Hotline UK. Samaritans came up. I had never heard of Samaritans, but it's here in the UK. There's many branches and something like 20,000 volunteers. So I thought, and I sent them an email through their website saying I'm interested in getting involved. They had me come in for an interview. I was approved for the training, and there's a lot of training to prepare you for what's coming. And then, and the way it works is you do 1 or 2 shifts a week if you can, and you go on site into the branch, and the shifts are 3 or 4 hours, and you're just taking calls from people in crisis. And it's a whole range of some people are low risk. They're just like lonely people who need to talk, make human contact for 20 or 30 minutes. Sometimes it's people dealing with a whole range of problems, and sometimes it's people who are actively suicidal. And there's all kinds of protocols for dealing with that. But I have found it to be, I love it. I love it. I consider it at this point to be one of the very most important things about myself. It's incredibly fulfilling. And the training that I got increased my, active listening skills tenfold. Um, and yeah, I just love it. And I'm also involved with Shout, which is kind of also an emotional support service, but it's all text. Um,
Okay.
and that's a very different clientele. That's mostly teens and 20s, because they're the ones who are texting all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a whole different range of problems, generally speaking. Um, but the takeaway from working with Shout is that the mental health crisis amongst young people is real. I mean, it's really real. There's a lot of hurting going on out there, but also very fulfilling to work for them. Um,
Yeah, thank you for sharing that so openly and hard it works. I understood that your brother was he was a veteran, right? Like he served.
yeah, he was 10 years in the American Army. He was a military policeman, and he saw action in, it was called Operation Just Cause in the late '80s, which was a drug interdiction program, military program going on in Central America, and he was involved with that. And I never really spoke to him about what he did and saw, but I think that was one of the sources of the complex PTSD that he was grappling with.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
It's tough, and I can't actually possibly imagine or put myself in her shoes. And do you have other siblings as well? Like, as you
I
have
had
brother?
2 half brothers whom I've he was my only full brother,
Yeah.
but I have 2 half brothers.
So yeah, big challenge and loss there. But you talked about the fulfillment that's come from it, which, to try and take something from a situation and not have anything, I guess, wasted in the experience of being alive and loving and all the rest of that stuff. When you mentioned fulfillment, I picked up on the active listening training that and what that's giving you. But in what other ways have you found fulfillment in giving back through Shout or the Samaritans? Because if someone hearing this is thinking, yeah, it sounds like something I would like to do, I'd just love to just share some of the ways that for you personally it's been fulfilling.
Sometimes you'll get a call that really sticks in your craw for a long time, and you take it home with you. But sometimes, usually about once, sometimes twice per shift, you get a call from somebody, and, the first thing that you're doing as you're talking to these callers is you're building rapport. You're trying to get them to trust you enough to open up. And if you sense that they're hesitant, you can say, "This is totally confidential. I don't know where you are. I don't know your phone number. We're just 2 people talking." So it's perfectly safe to say whatever you need to say. And as it goes along, um, sometimes you have a call where you just feel like you've really connected with this person, and you really help them to get through something, at least for an hour or 2.
Mm.
Mm, and occasionally, you'll get a call that ends with, "You just saved my life," and you just, you walk out of the branch at the end of those shifts on air, because, it's like no other kind of volunteering, as far as I'm concerned, because it's weird, you're sitting there on the phone, and it's completely intense and completely intimate, and these people are just, they're just spilling their life story and all of their darkest stuff, um, and, the training, and it enables you to, A, to handle it, and to distance yourself from it, but it also trains you to ask the right kinds of questions, which are mostly open-ended questions, geared towards feelings. Uh, but that's really what it comes down to for me, are just those moments of real, genuine, heartfelt bargain basement connection where you just feel like you've really, really help somebody.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a little bit, because I mean, a lot of these people, one of the things they tell you in the training is you're not here to solve problems, and we're not allowed to give advice. We're just here to listen and be empathetic. Um, but I mean, a lot of these people, their lives are just smoking ruins, and there's no solutions. There's no options. So you've got to learn to distance yourself from that, and try to, avoid the instinct of fishing around for solutions, especially when there aren't any. Um, so that's what it comes down to for me. It's just the beauty of that feeling of helping someone. It's just really nice. And if anybody watching this is feeling in crisis and doesn't know about Samaritans, you can call them at 116-123, 24 hours. That's the number.
Thank you so much. And I'll make sure that I put that as part of the resources and the website, etc., on there so people can tune in. But 116-123 is the number if they wanted to discuss it. Thank you, because yeah, I mean, you've spanned what that fulfillment means to you from being one human being to another human being and hearing them. I mean, how many times do we go through our day and not really get heard, really heard? Because I feel so many people listen to respond to you rather than
That's
to
that's what Samaritans is all about. It's like
yeah,
that's we are there to listen when nobody else will.
yeah,
Um, and occasionally to ask hard questions. Part of the training is, steer into the pain. Okay, you want to at a certain point in the conversation, you're supposed to ask every caller, are you like really hurting from this? Are you having suicidal thoughts? Nobody out there in the world is going to ask that. It's only,
yeah,
but we will and do because we want to know and we want to help.
yeah. But that's yeah, it's being authentic and being real, but also being human, and to get from connection on a I'm lonely but want to be heard, actively heard, to someone saying to you, thank you. You saved my life. I don't know, like me volunteering at the school PTA. Yeah, it's not gonna be, it's not this. But again, I'm not trying to compare, but I'm just credit or recognition where recognition is due that I think you're right. I don't know that there'd be many other forms of volunteering which can really have that life or death dynamic to it, and I think, yeah, kudos to you for that. So let me ask one other thing around this, which is if someone's listening currently and is personally quietly struggling, we've got the number. But if they're worried about someone they love, because that can sometimes be a hard one where it's you, you're worried. Like
Right.
what's one thing that perhaps you'd want them to know? Um,
I'd want them to know that Samaritans is again available as a resource 24/7. Um, and I would probably my first advice would be, if this person that you're worried about, how would they take it if you suggested to them that they call Samaritans? Um, they may take it well, they may not. And the final thing I would say was, Samaritans does do third party calls. We will, if we're given, adequate reason, we will call somebody on somebody else's request. That does happen. Not very much, but it does happen, and we do that. Yeah. And another thing we do is we signpost. We have a list of vetted organizations, like Mind, Drink Aware, things like that. We if somebody calls us and says, "I'm really worried about my son or my husband or my father," and then they describe what's going on, we might offer, information about, calling this other organization that might be able to handle it better than we are. Yeah.
Sure. So yeah, so it sounds like you can s- ask the question around how the person might feel if you suggested it, but then also third party calls are there, and then there are organizations that depend on the specific nature. I can't get my words out. The specific nature of the challenge, they may be better equipped to offer some meaningful support there. So yeah, thank you. That's brilliant. And I knew this would happen when we met, and I said to you like we need to talk. I knew this would happen, that we'd fly through the hour with absolutely. We've done it. But there is to. I don't say it's a bad thing that we've talked about. I think it's life and it's real, and it is important to connect to that. But if I could look ahead with you now to the future, given that we're 8 months into this year already, which is beyond me, like how we are here, but what does the rest of the year have in store for you? Perhaps creatively, professionally, and beyond even, because there may be some things happening for you which people would love to hear about just as we draw our
I have, an original science fiction graphic novel coming out in
Okay.
January or February from Soaring Penguin Press, a UK publisher. Um, and, it's something that I worked on off and on for 5 years. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, these are book projects. I mean, if you're doing a 200-page original graphic novel and you're writing and drawing it, it's very labor intensive. These things take, but I wasn't working on just that for those 5 years. It was kind of a back burner project. Um, yeah, so that's my big news. And beyond that, I'm gonna start collaborating with a friend, a comics writer named Joel Meadows, who's, UK based, very dear friend of mine. He'll be writing and I'll be drawing a graphic novel. Um, and I'm also, I've just completed the 6th draft of a novel, which was kind of a bucket list thing for me, was doing a prose a long form prose piece. Um, whether or not it sees the light of day, I'll let you know.
And on that, what can you share a topic of like what it will cover or what it will be around?
It's just about, a 17-year-old girl who, escapes from a smothering society-wide internet-based cult, in the year 2111. So it's a love story, but it's also kind of a running commentary critique of the internet and what it's done to us, what it's doing to us, and what in the fullness of time it might do to us. And it's kind of about the erosion of privacy and shame.
Mm.
See, I'm from it's a weird thing. I'm from Generation X, and I remember the pre-internet world. But once my generation is gone, nobody will. Um,
Mm.
and so I'm kind of ideally situated to write a piece that grapples with the whole question of what the internet has done to, because I've seen it firsthand. I
Yeah, living through it, right? We're living.
The internet,
We
social media, it's I believe, Ty, that it has fundamentally almost changed human nature. I kind of jokingly refer to, Homo iPhonensis, which is people are different from when I was a kid, literally. They have symbiotic relationships with their devices, and, uh, it's changed them. Um, anyway, don't get me
yeah.
started.
When you're back over a soft drink or a hot drink or something, we need to pick this one up because I think there is and I feel very similarly. There are some great connectivity things like you being the other side of the water and me being here and us being able to do this, but I think there is a simplicity um to human relationships that has is eroding away. It's not completely gone, but it's just different
Mhm.
now, and, I wouldn't say it's all for the good. So, I think this book actually needs to happen is I would buy it. So, no pressure, but pressure. Make it happen because I would love to see.
Like more.
Yeah, definitely. So, I think, as, I la I'd love to just share a short outro, and then I'll pass over to you for the final word if you wouldn't mind. Is that
Okay.
okay?
Yeah.
Like, so my my outro would be really from a philosophy classroom to the pages of DC Comics, to the quiet, difficult work of showing up for others in their darkest moment. I think Prentice, you've shown that purpose isn't always a straight line. You know, sometimes it's built from grief, sometimes it's built from a late start, or simply refusing to let the hardship of life have the final word in our stories. I think for anyone listening, if today's episode has resonated with you, I'd love for that to be shared, for you to subscribe. Obviously, that helps to keep people informed about what's going on. But also, more importantly, share it with someone that needs to hear it. Share it with someone that's thinking that they haven't yet got it all figured out. Because actually, as we've discussed, everything is welcome and nothing is really wasted in that journey of becoming. So, um, yeah, if there's someone you love that's struggling on the other side of things, don't carry it alone. Reach out, talk to someone, use the resources that I'll be making sure that I put here. And I'd just like to invite everyone to look after one another. And I hope they've enjoyed sipping on this inspiration as much as I have. So, Prentice, thank you once again. It's been a roller coaster of a journey, and I feel like I'm even more deeply connected with the amazing journey that you've been on. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kofi. Appreciate it.
Grand. So over to you if there are any final words, because you're the man of the hour. So if there's anything that you'd like to add before we conclude.
Um, Thank you for having me, Kofi. Yeah, I hope that this provides some insight and inspiration, for people who are trying to get into creative fields. And I would finally just like to, yeah, reaffirm the beauty and potential fulfillment to be found in volunteerism and volunteering for in particular for something like Samaritans or Shout, because as I said, I consider it to be one of the most important things about myself, and that happened in a very short time. It's only 2 years now, but it's rounded out my life in a very pleasing and wonderful way. That's it.
Full. So much. That's really powerful. One of my favorite sayings is giving is living. And I think you have demonstrated how the power of giving really can mean living for somebody, like really, really can. So thank you for bringing that to life. Thank you once again. And when you're back from globetrotting and have got over the jet lag that you're experiencing, let me know so we can get together in person. All right.
Very much looking forward to that.
All right. So take care and love to the family and Jackie as well. All right.
Thank you, Kofi.
Cheers. Bye now.